Ich bin der Schlüsselmacher. Aber ich mache nicht einfach nur Schlüssel. Ich verschaffe dir Zugang zu den besten Geschichten der Welt. Denn meine Schlüssel bringen dich überall hin und können alles mit dir machen. Ist der hier für dich?
Unlock great stories. Kanal Plus. Stream großartige europäische Serien und Filme.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Hello. My name is Romualdo. You can call me Rumi. Welcome to you all here at WAVES Festival. We are having this panel talk on harm reduction on music events. A little bit about me. Oh, by the way, this... Sorry?
No.
What happened? No?
No?
Oh, all right. All right. This panel has been organized by the Vienna Club Commission. And yes, I'm very happy to be here. A little bit to myself, I'm a DJ and party promoter here in Vienna. I would say co-host of 2 parties. And I'm also a psychologist and social scientist, so I'm actually very interested in what we're going to be talking here today with these 3 fellows right here. I'm going to go ahead and present them to you first. We have Orshi Feher. She's a researcher, development consultant, and activist who founded the local peer-based harm reduction organization PsyCare Austria. She has a degree in economics and communication science from the University of Vienna that she earned researching the psychedelic stigma in the former Eastern Bloc and its consequences in academia. Orshi is an avid advocate for drug policy reform and has served on the boards of the NGO committees on drugs at the United Nations. She works with providers of legal psychedelic experiences, and her latest article on involving young people in harm reduction has recently been published on Harm Reduction Journal. And that's Urshi right here in the middle. We also have with us Steve Müller. He's a senior counselor at Check It, service center providing free drug safety testing, phone and online counseling, and also online resources. Amongst other things, Steve provides drug information and counseling for service users and training for counselors. Occasionally, you will also find him speaking or facilitating conferences. Next week, I've heard. He has worked in the drug field in different countries and has contributed to Check It in various roles throughout the years. Steve says that he feels passionate about people's right for non-biased information and their capability to make informed decisions about their own well-being. And finally, we have Jacob Chagnin, there you go. He's a recent graduate from Central European University, an activist focusing on global drug policy, reform, and community health. He advocates for the integration of compassionate, health-based approaches to substance use, and his attention is currently centered on expanding harm reduction services in the Viennese nightlife and club culture. On this panel, he will introduce the concept of a safer partying label and how this can be implemented in Vienna to combine the city's harm reduction efforts and providers. Great, I would like to break the ice and start a little bit maybe with you, Orshi. I would like to first start kind of at the, let's say, community level, or how does it look more, at the community level, and then move up to maybe talk about policy and how does it look like at the local and more on the global level. Orshi, tell us a little bit about your work at PsyCare, what you do, and maybe a little bit of 101 on harm reduction.
Okay. So, hi everyone. I'll start with the brief introduction to my organization, Psycher Austria. We are providing harm reduction services to people who use drugs. And the gist of the work is standing on two pillars. The first one is acute crisis handling, when we go to places of consumption of drugs, usually music festivals, and we bring a safe space and a bunch of volunteers who are trained to look after people who are experiencing spiritual, psychological, psychedelic crises. And then the other one is the integration, which is kind of the processing of any really intense experience and of any altered state. Mostly it is in collision with drugs, but it doesn't necessarily have to be an altered state of consciousness that is induced by drugs. And to talk about the community, the way that we started this organization is with my co-founder, Marlene Rupp. She was the founder of the Psychedelic Society of Vienna at the time, and I was leading an activist organization that maybe Jacob will talk a little bit more later, called Students for Sensible Drug Policy, which is a global network of students who act locally to change policies and fill the gaps in welfare services in their communities. And then as kind of a lesson, as we met these two communities and started to work together, we realized that there is, again, a gap in services as to how we can look after each other in nightlife settings and for people who use drugs by people who use drugs, so that it's a peer kind of relationship. And I have been doing such nightlife party services in Hungary. I'm originally from Hungary, and I couldn't really find that group here in Vienna. And it's really funny because we were just talking about this with Steve before this session, that I had my conversation with him 7 years ago and basically just asking him what to do. How can I do all of this? And he gave me really, really important advice that I followed to the word. And now we have Psycher Austria. And did that answer your question? Currently,
Yeah. Yes, thank you very much. I think we are going to do a kind of a round of presentations and then move on to some specific questions that I have and also people in the audience might have. Steve, welcome. Tell us a little bit about what you do at Check It. How does it work with the drug testing services that you provide, and how you've been involved throughout the years, because you've been there for quite some time.
That would take too long. No. I don't know who of you knows Check It already, but we are based in Vienna and we are providing a range of services. The most well-known one is drug checking on outreach. That means in the nightlife setting, we are providing the possibility for people who want to know what's in the substance that they've bought or brought to the event. So they can find out the exact chemical composition, and they can also access counseling. So for most people, the results that we give out aren't necessarily easy to understand because they might not have known about this or that substance. So they approach us, they ask us, what does this mean, what does that mean? And so we basically go through the chemical composition, the effects that they can expect given this chemical composition and their physical makeup. And yeah, we try to support people to make informed decisions about their health. So whether they want to use this specific substance, how much they want to use, and also which role the experience of taking the substance plays for them when they are having a night out or in their entire life. So that's the most well-known part of our work. And aside of that, we are also providing counseling at our counseling center, which is based in the 6th district, close to the museums quarter. And people can come there when they have experiences that they didn't expect from a substance, or when they have any other problem resulting from their drug use, maybe with their partners, parents, workplace, school, university, whatever. Basically everything that bothers them and is related to drugs, they can come to us and we would support them. Most people use our services to reflect upon their drug use. So whether the drug use is still fine within the life they are currently leading. And some choose to change their drug use, and we support them with that as well. Anything else? We do workshops in schools, in youth centers. We also do we help services, service development. We help other organizations with service development all over Europe. Anything else? Yeah, conferences, things like that. Did I forget anything? You guys know us as well?
I will have tons of questions for you later that I have written down. And last but not least, Jacob. Hi, can you introduce us? I know you have, maybe you want to go ahead and explain what is this safer partying label that you developed or trying to bring into the Viennese club culture a little bit, so you can feel free to expand on this concept.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I'm here to talk about today is a little bit forward-looking, because we have various actors in Vienna providing harm reduction services. For example, Check It, for example, Check It, for example, PsyCare. And there are various methods to sort of synthesize all the actions and harm reduction efforts and actors that are in the city. We spent the last year in partnership with Orshi and PsyCare with a small team basically researching what determines the provision of harm reduction services within Viennese club culture and nightlife. And one of the biggest takeaways we had is that Vienna really already has all it needs in terms of actors and knowledge for expanding harm reduction services. But there are many ways that we could go about this in the future. And I'll go into the application to the Viennese context later, but one of these is this concept called a safer partying label. Maybe some of you know what it is already, maybe people in the online audience know. It's been done in different places around Europe. For example, in Switzerland was really my focus when I was looking into it. But basically the concept of a safer partying label is to give sort of a word and like a synthesized concept to standardizing harm reduction and safety provisions. For example, it's meant mostly to synthesize different actions. So safer partying labels are usually awarded to venues, to actual clubs themselves, when they meet certain safety criteria. For example, having freely available condoms, earplugs, usually involves also having the staff, whether it's security staff or bar staff, trained on overdose prevention or what to do in emergency situations when people are not feeling well. So these types of safety provisions that make party going safer for party goers. So they know when they actually show up to the party, to the club, that they can expect a certain standard. So what they do is basically synthesize these different ideas about harm reduction and safety, put them together in one kind of word, one label, and then award it. And it's a way to basically make sure that there is some sort of standardized, synthesized action in terms of safety for partygoers, so that it's easier to actually implement harm reduction at venues. And on the flip side, the value to the partygoers is they know that when they see a club that's been awarded this label, that they can expect certain provisions to be provided for them. There's so much discussion right now about creating safer spaces, and there's lots of emerging trends in Vienna and all around the world, but for example, in Vienna with the awareness teams, and this gaining traction and creating safer spaces. So we kind of, so safer partying label is a way to bring this all together, and basically make it more standardized, make it more visible, and make safety provision and harm reduction in nightlife more accessible. So that's the gist of it, and we'll go into what this could mean in a Viennese context, forward-looking in a little bit.
Great, thank you. I actually really like the fact that you mentioned now harm reduction in a more holistic sense and not just drug use. Could you elaborate? Could this maybe be sort of a way of, because I have the feeling there might be venues or party promoters that feel kind of singled out if they do something, even though everyone feels that this thing should be done, but they feel like, ooh, then we might get a bad rep or something. Would that be a way, you know, creating a more holistic understanding of harm reduction?
Yeah, that's actually exactly the point. So especially when we were doing this investigation this last year, we found that generally all the various actors in Vienna are supportive of harm reduction measures, including for drug use. But as you mentioned, harm reduction is more than just for drug use. I mean, there are the classical measures like drug checking, which are super essential to know what people are taking, general safer information about how to consume more safely or reduce the harms when people do. But we're also talking about general well-being at the clubs, protection in situations where there's sexual assault or harassment happening, and this is, I think, what awareness teams have been also crucial for. So there's this kind of general sense of harm reduction and general sense of safety. But despite the fact that most actors in terms of club owners and party organizers and even the city themselves are supportive of harm reduction efforts, it's tough when there's this implicit understanding that if we're providing these measures, we must be admitting that drug use is happening, right? Or that situations could be unsafe. So there's this sort of implicit balance between providing safety measures so that the environments actually are safer and partygoers feel like they have everything they need, but not being too explicit. And this is exactly what a safer partying label can help target, because if it's a standardized system, then it's not up to the individual party organizers or club owners to have to do everything themselves and organize everything themselves, which many do already, but many don't. But it eliminates this hesitation in the sense that we can say, okay, to get a safer partying label, you have to do X, Y, and Z. You know, have awareness teams at all parties bigger than X many attendance, for example, or have these types of measures at least this many times a month, or all the staff, at least a percentage of the staff, are trained on what to do if someone's having a difficult psychological or psychedelic experience, or what to do if someone's too intoxicated. The standards themselves are always up to the cities or the implementing bodies. In other words, we can choose what standards we would want for a safer partying label, but because it's synthesized, we get more quality control in terms of like, okay, we can expect a certain standard, and it eliminates, and also like when the actions are synthesized and the standards are clear, then this burden's no longer put on individual party organizers or club owners to do everything themselves. Basically, it's a sort of collaborative outsourcing of safety standards, which necessarily involves many different actors. So it actually is also intended to bring different harm reduction organizations like awareness teams, like PsyCare, like Check It, together and coordinate their efforts, and also take off this individual burden. And obviously this contributes, or could contribute, to a general environment defined by safety and not defined by this having to navigate this weird in-between space of how do we accept that more provisions need to be provided, and not get in trouble for recognizing or implicitly accepting there's drug use or whatever it is, even though it is part of the nightlife scene. So yeah, so that's a little bit of how general safety environment could be created. Yeah.
Steve, I have a question for you. I've seen there are some reports saying, you know, there is not necessarily more drug use, but there is, in fact, a higher incidence of hospitalizations and harms in many countries has been observed. How does this kind of correlate with the current drug market? What are you actually seeing in the current drug market that might be different than before? Maybe I can go into the question later, but how does it also look like for the younger generation, for younger club goers? Because it seems to be like it's more prevalent in this age segment.
Where to start? Okay, I'll pick out hospitalizations, because hospitalizations are something that are hard to attribute to a certain factor, like a change in the drugs market. Sometimes it's possible, but there are so many things that influence, for example, this one number of hospitalizations in the Vienna General Hospital, which is just around the corner, for those of you who don't know. You see reports in the media about maybe one instance when, let's take the usual, a young person dies or almost dies. And this is then blamed onto someone or something. If it's blamed on something, it's a drug. If it's blamed on someone, it's maybe a party organizer who hadn't had the measures in place that were suggested by the Safer Partying label. But really, that's not necessarily the reason for it, because there are so many factors going into it. Like, for example, what's the regional or current regional culture of using a specific substance? What has been the culture among the peers of that person to whom that happened? And what's never, ever mentioned is the number of people during the same night who've been out there and have had a safe night out. But when it comes to the drugs market, over the last decade, we've seen an increase in purity in most substances, like, for example, cocaine or MDMA, ecstasy, and an increase in the dosages that were in the pills. But that was fairly stable over the last couple of years, and now the range is increasing. So we see pills with a fairly low dose and few impurities. We also see pills with a very high dose and few impurities. We also see both with impurities again, which wasn't that prevalent for the last, let's say, 5 or 10 years. And synthetic cannabinoids are a thing. People do consume them intentionally, but some people consume them unintentionally, so they are kind of adulterants in the cannabis or cannabis product that is bought. I have to say that what we see in our work is only a segment of that market, because it's an illegal market, it's a black market, and it has all its hallmarks. It can't be monitored the way you can monitor a legal market, for example. So what we see is just a segment, and that's the segment of predominantly young people who are going out partying. What are they using? But it's an essential segment because our data sets can join the dots between what has the person bought the substance as, what is actually inside the substance, the chemical composition, and how it was used. So these are things you can't find out with any other method of monitoring the drugs market. If you see substances when they are imported into the country, you don't know whether this is the substance that it would have been sold as, or whether it would have been cut or combined or the composition changed, or how it would have been used.
Before I jump to Orshi, I want to ask you one more question. What's the age demographic of users at Check It? Who comes and actually check for their drugs?
Well, that depends on the venues and on the music scenes that we are providing our services in. Like, it really depends on which organizer is inviting us and is collaborating with us. Little advertising. Okay. But I would say that predominantly it's young people below the age of 25 who are accessing our services on outreach. With our new services that we introduced during the pandemic, that people are able to hand in samples of their substances at our drop-in shop in the 6th district, we are reaching both even younger people, like in their teens, and people who are older, who are now maybe try to relive their youth or try to, well, do something they think they have to do and they haven't done it when they were young, like consuming substances and having sex with their wife or partner. Okay. Things like that.
Okay, yeah, great, thank you. Because I was actually kind of curious about because I would have imagined more like between the 30s and 40s, but that it's such an young segment that already uses this service is, of course, a good sign.
Can I add something to this question?
Yes.
Because I think what you were asking about kind of made me think of the things that I have seen this year coming out from 2 years of lockdowns all over Europe, and kind of got in contact with the Swiss, German, Czech, Hungarian, and the UK-based psych care organizations to see if this is like a trend. Of course, we don't have as great data, so my answer is a bit less pragmatic. And I also really like this disclaimer that what we get in contact with and what my experience is like the people who need support. So obviously, probably the 10% of the people who have these experiences. But yes, there is a layer of young people who came to age or of age during COVID. So there is an element of isolation or like a different kind of culture around substance use and partying and any kind of recreational activity. Some people use this generational divide kind of expression. I just think that they just missed this kind of experience of going out and partying with people who know how to have the best time and avoid problems. And at the same time, parallel to this, I have to mention that there's a trend of researching psychedelics for therapeutic use, and they are increasingly trendy topic to work with, deal with, talk about, etc. So I think there's definitely something in that direction that your question was kind of alluding, in my experience.
Thank you. And while we'll stay with you, Orshi, I've had lately a very particular experience at a festival, because PsyCare is a peer-led organization, right? And this whole community feeling was something that kind of struck me during a festival, because I saw two instances of people who apparently were not visibly doing well, but people around them already took preventive measures to make sure that they are okay. So they didn't even wait for them to know you collapse on the floor. How does the concept, the idea of generating community or can actually have an impact on festivals and on clubs or parties?
Oh, I really like this question. So I would go back one step and kind of give a definition, the best of my abilities, to harm reduction and what is harm reduction. And so in our trainings, I usually pose it as an open question, a brainstorming kind of moment, because there is not a universally accepted definition of harm reduction. There is not a recipe of what step 1, 2, 3, or how you address someone in crisis who needs support. The whole idea of harm reduction is that we meet people where they're at. So any kind of intervention is tailored to whoever is receiving it. And in many instances, especially now coming out from this period of isolation, being in community and being able to relate to people and talk in a way that is a lot less soft and grounded and non-judgmental than let's say the rough or rougher environment of the festival is. I think that this in itself is harm reduction to many people who are having a crisis situation. And to just break it down to very basic examples, somebody is tripping the F out on the main floor when it's very intense music, they lost their friends, they're having paranoid ideas about the mosquito bite that they just had, and then they walk into a safe space where there are volunteers who have had lots of sleep, which I know it's not a trendy thing at festivals to be rested. So we're already bringing in a different energy, and just sit down and listen to them and ground them in this reality and have no limits to where their mind is going. So this in itself, having people around you that can relate to your experience, not judge you, and just be present, I think is already a really important harm reduction measure. So awesome question.
Well, thank you. Maybe. Oh, you forgot something.
No, I want to segue a little bit into what Jacob is going to talk about in terms of harm reduction. This is a conversation I've had many times this summer, is that harm reduction, in my opinion, is inherently political. Because a lot of the harms that we encounter, as Steve has also said, is a consequence of operating in a black market, that it has its own dangers inherently. So a lot of the harm is caused by the policies themselves. So a lot of our work is very tightly tied into changing the landscape or influencing the way society or healthcare services or first responders, law enforcement works. So, yeah, I don't know. Take over.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will give you the word, Jacob, to elaborate a little bit more on how you would apply this concept of a safer parting label here in Vienna.
Yeah, I think there's a few things that have been raised so far, and also what Orsi just mentioned about the general landscape, that connect very well to this safer partying label concept. At its roots, a safer partying label is a structural provision, right? It is not predicated on the target audience being partygoers or what have you, actually proactively seeking out services. It's also not dependent on which organizations, which clubs, which parties actively choose to have harm reduction efforts there. Because this is actually something that Steve and Orsi just both mentioned, that a lot of the statistics are skewed and the knowledge is skewed and the provision is skewed towards the festivals and the clubs which actively choose to bring in Check It or Psycare, or the partygoers which actively choose to run by the Check It home base or come by to the Psycare tent if they see or something like this. And the whole point of integrating a structural approach to harm reduction and safety is that you eliminate, or you don't totally eliminate, but you eliminate the need for this proactively choosing to provide safety services or having to actually go to where the services are provided. So then the whole idea, as Orsi was just mentioning, is changing the landscape of the party scene or whatever the target location is, but in this case the party scene, changing the landscape so that as soon as you enter this space, as soon as you're a part of this space, certain provisions are already there. And that's what I was saying before about having synthesized action and basically quality control, so that as soon as you're in the space, whether you're someone who is an experienced drug user and knows how to take your dosage and knows how to ask for help and where to go for help, or if you are someone who's 17, 18, has just entered the partying scene. The couple years were defined by COVID. You don't have maybe older friends or other friends who can provide peer information. You don't know the different support systems and structures like Psycare and Check It. You have absolutely no idea, but you are also still met with a certain standard of safety and certain standard of provision, because the environment itself, the landscape itself of the club or the festival already has different actors there, already has staff who are trained, already has free info cards, earplugs, whatever it is, of the different sort of risk associated with partying, whether it be, whether it's substance use or loud noise exposure or sexual situations, whatever situations you might encounter, the general environment is already laid out. So that's the sort of landscape or environmental structural approach of this. But then there's the question of, again, what does this look like in Vienna? And I think Vienna is in a really unique position because, it already has so many really experienced, knowledgeable actors like Check It, like Psycare, like their awareness teams, and like other smaller organizations or other organizations providing services. And then it also has the advantage of the fact that other European cities like Zurich have already done safer partying labels, and we can kind of learn from these examples of what can be done. And just the fact that we have Check It in Vienna alone is, I think, monumental in terms of indicating that there is this attitude, there is this appetite for providing safety provisions and recognition that that something could be done. So then again, what does this actually look like in Vienna? That could be up to Vienna. That can be up to the different actors at play. So it could be that we decide we want to have awareness teams at every party, or we want to actually have check it at more events than they can currently go to. And to answer this question, you also need to integrate all the different actors that are here. So it's really a fantastic opportunity to bring different actors like Check It, PsyCare, the Club Commission, the City of Vienna, awareness teams, party organizers, club owners, club operators, security staff like bouncers, all together and put them in the same place and say, okay, what standards do we actually expect? What standards do we have? What are our priorities? What are our needs? What services can we provide? Personally, I think a biggest thing, I mean, I've already talked a little bit about how a safer partying label can target the attitudes related to harm reduction and eliminate this like proactive need, or at least eliminate this hesitation towards providing services. But I think ideally, one of the biggest sort of roadblocks to providing more harm reduction services when we already have so many actors, like always, is funding, is money. So a safer partying label is also a really good pitch to the city or to whoever the funding body is to say, hey, look, we have all these different provisions. We can put them all in one thing, give it a name, Vienna Safer Partying Label or Vienna Seal of Harm Reduction, whatever. It's really up to us ourselves to do this. But it gives it a name. It gives it synthesized and clear standards. And then this sort of like synthesized pitch is a lot easier to justify for funding. Because when we were doing this investigation this last year too, one of the biggest problems is that organizations like PsyCare, like awareness teams, they want to do more, but it's hard to justify if you don't have money. Club operators and party organizers want to have people there who can deal with difficult situations or provide safety provisions, but when you're a club operator and there's many different things you need to worry about between licensing and bar staff, and it's not essential to do this, well then it's an extra cost. And as we all know, if it's an extra cost, it might not get priority. So when it is synthesized, it's a lot easier to justify putting money towards. And if the city can fund it, or whatever other funding body can fund it, because it's this nice, clean, beautiful plan with all the different stakeholders together, well then, if we eliminate the funding aspect, then it's a lot easier to justify doing it. And the question starts to become, why don't we have the Safer Partying label at this club if it's just a matter of doing it, if it's no longer a matter of funding? Yeah, so I mean, that's a lot, right? But generally, it's just pushing towards, instead of having the burden be on individual organizations, club operators, party organizers to have this, to have the label as sort of an environmental approach, just to change the landscape itself, and ideally have the funding available because we already have the knowledge, we already have the actors.
Thank you very much. Maybe kind of a general question to all of you. What do you see? I mean, you've mentioned a few already. What do you see as barriers toward implementation of such a label? I think, or my thought process sometimes, I think it's it takes a shift to go from criminalization and focusing on substance possession towards more health, safety of guests and partygoers. What do you see are the main barriers toward the implementation?
Rumi, could you repeat the question just one more time?
Just basically, you just presented the parties, the safer partying label. Basically, what do you see as deterrence, or what would be a barrier at the, I don't know, legal level, licensing level, or is there enough knowledge and understanding of, harm reduction in the different stakeholders that are involved? Because you don't only have the venue, you also have the party promoters, the police, the council, the staff. So what would you say are barriers or things that kind of could be in the way toward the implementation?
May I? Okay. I would rephrase the question.
Okay.
How
Go ahead.
Because I don't have an answer. How can we realize a mutual benefit for all involved actors? How can organizers benefit from it? How can venues benefit from it? How does the city benefit from it? How does service providers benefit from it? It needs to be designed with everyone in mind. We can't just say, for example, Vienna, I mean, that's not a secret. The city has a tradition to follow a top-down approach when it comes to social services and, of course, regulation. It doesn't work this way when you want to introduce a safer party label. You have to have every actor in mind.
Okay, well, from a personal perspective, or what I see in the course of this project and working with grassroots organizations, is that everyone involved is doing it out of some kind of intrinsic motivation, wanting to change for the better. I mean, change the world or the environments for the better. And it's a lot of emotional labor, I think, and very little financial reward, and sometimes even any other kind of reward. So this is, I think, the biggest obstacle of what I see in my teams and other activists, is that we just need money, and it sucks to say.
Yeah, I mean, I really agree, and I think one thing is relates to the attitudes about harm reduction here, and one of the big areas, I guess, is increasing the public salience, the public awareness of both the need for harm reduction, or at least as Steve has put it, the benefit of having these service providers around, and also of the fact that we do have the actors available. And so right now we're at this kind of interesting point in time where it's sort of post-COVID, or at least the club culture is coming back to life, and there's this increasing understanding of safety as a holistic measure, not just insecurity even as a holistic measure. You know, when we go to a club, it just doesn't mean strong guys at the door who throw out people who are problematic, but it also means people who go around and see if everyone's doing okay, or talk to people who's not okay. So I think there's an opportunity to ride this sort of increasingly holistic and just whole sense of safety and well-being as part of increasing awareness about the potential benefit of harm reduction and safety provisions. So it's the attitude bit, and then, as Orshi said, it's the funding. Like, we already have so many actors who are interested in the work they do, but if you're doing it for free or on a volunteer basis, we have to eat, right? We got to pay rents. Nothing's getting cheaper right now. It's hard to justify doing this work, never mind doing this work full time and in collaboration with so many different actors, if you can't expect any financial, not even reward, just basic compensation. And when we talked to different actors throughout this last year, they all mentioned this, that more could be done if you could actually fund it. And that's why the sort of label, or at least synthesize action, is good, because then you can give it a name and it's easier to justify funding. And if it's easier to justify funding, it's easier to justify expanding provision. And these two things are tied, right? Increasing the awareness and expanding provision. The more conversations are happening about a topic, the more public awareness is happening about a topic, the more political interest there is, and then the more political interest, the more opportunity for funding. But at the end of the day, the biggest benefit, I think, at least from the research I did, and as Steve just mentioned, is that you actually have to get everyone involved, all the different actors involved. And when I interviewed Alexander Bücheli, who's the head of the Zurich Bar and Club Commission, about the foundation of the Swiss Safer Partying label, he said the biggest thing for them right now, in terms of like their organizational goals in the future, is to continue to bring local actors together. That's the biggest benefit, is actually just bringing everyone and the knowledge that already exists and the actors which already exist together. And that is would be, I think, also the main goal in Vienna, because again, we have what we need. We just need to put it together.
Great, thank you. I think it kind of, you all make crystal clear what one of the barriers is, namely funding. I guess from a political perspective, it's also always the question, okay, what's the efficacy or what's the actual, is there evidence for us to be spending money on this? And you know, there is a lot of research outside, a lot, I wouldn't say a lot, but there is enough evidence in other countries. Do you plan within the framework of your party label, or maybe you already, do you have some form of evaluation processes in place that can help, you know, substantiate this this cost, substantiate this funding? In place, or let's say, you know, in plan, you know, that might be doing in the future.
Yeah, I guess I'll just say one thing very briefly on this. This is also super important to have a monitoring scheme. And when I talked to the people in Switzerland, this was the biggest challenge they had, is that it wasn't actually clear how much the existence of a scheme to partygoers changes their behavior. If it's like, I'll actually choose to go to this party or this club because they have this safer label, or if it's a, hey, nice that it's there sort of thing. I would have gone anyways, but good to know. But when we talk about public funding especially, it's really essential to have a monitoring scheme. And this is what I meant before, that Vienna is in a unique place where it can learn from the best practice done elsewhere and also the pitfalls of done elsewhere. And I personally think that anything that will be done in Vienna, especially if it wants to get continued public funding and funding for activities, there should be some monitoring scheme. And for this, you'd also have to have many actors available to say, okay, what is difficult about implementing the scheme? Does this work for my target audience as a party organizer? Does this work for me as a club operator and our different business needs? So there isn't one clear-cut way how to do it, but the main point is that there should be some sort of monitoring scheme. And again, this is up to the actors involved, because it also is dependent on the safety activities involved.
All right. We still have 13 minutes approximately of this talk. I would like to maybe, otherwise, I don't know if you have anything that you would like to add, because otherwise would like to open up the round of questions from the public. If there are any questions right here, yes, in the first row.
My question is, like, there are different ways how people get intoxicated.
Oops, maybe,
okay.
Yeah.
I should have thought about this. So there are different ways how people get intoxicated. Like during this talk, we mostly concentrate on illegal ways how people get intoxicated, but also you can get very, very drunk and pass out as well. Do we have anything in place for that cases already, or is it all like as marginalized as drug users?
I think, I think alcohol is probably still, no, not probably, definitely still the main cause of harm and disturbance.
The illegal substances, as you've rightly mentioned, get the most attention by the media, by the people who go to parties. Whenever I'm invited to speak, well, anywhere, it comes to the question of what's the most popular substance right now, and I always go like, well, right now the most popular substance among people who are partying is still alcohol, and it will remain to be alcohol. And the question is how to build a culture of, or how, no, we don't have to build one, because we already have a culture of conscious drug use regardless of the substance, including alcohol. Most people know what to do to have a safe night out with alcohol or with any other substance. But some people don't, because they might lack the knowledge, the forethought, the services to access to gain those. How do we develop a culture? And I think these organizations that grow out of the party scene are the best way to develop these cultures. that culture. English is difficult.
Yeah, I was thinking about the name of this collective that existed in Vienna before the pandemic, mostly made up of young people that was focusing on alcohol, but I don't remember their name. I think it was also just a seasonal project, maybe. But to piggyback on what you just said, yeah, indeed, alcohol is the most popular drug, and I think most people consider alcohol and honestly weed as a non-issue, or even categorize it as a soft drug. And as we can see in the policy trend, cannabis is probably in our lifetime is going to become decriminalized, if not legalized. But most of the challenging cases that we see in our tent are some kind of substance mixed with alcohol or cannabis, or mostly both, and the third, more psychoactive substance. So yeah, I don't know if that answers.
Any other questions? Yes.
Oh, alcohol is a drug. Yes.
Hi, so thank you for your presentations. Sorry. There are several points that came to my mind. First of all, I really like the holistic approach of safety. It also reminds me theoretically to like a feminist approach to what is safety. It's not only the absence of violence, but also the, like the holistic approach as you explained it. And I also really agree with linking the issue of harm reduction with like benefits for everyone. And then my questions would be for Jacob, for example. What is the political will in Vienna right now? What's the state of arts? Have you actually met with policymakers? Have there been conferences, or is this something that we need to push forward? So what does Vienna actually think would be one of my questions. And then, Steve, I would also be interested in because you were saying that, of course, in the illegal market brings with it that we don't have data and that we don't have enough research on it. How is it with like countries that have legalized at least some kind of drugs? Is the scene any different there? Is the party scene different? Is it easier in the Netherlands, for example, to implement harm reduction measures? All right, I think there were quite a few more, but I'll leave it this way. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just jump in briefly. I think Steve and Orshi could probably speak to this better than me as many years long service providers, but at least during the last year during this project, the answer is yine. Like there is support for harm reduction measures and definitely willingness to do so. If there weren't, then we wouldn't have so many actors that are also receiving at least temporary funding. Like I think Ava Stern has funding right now for at least secondary, like a renewed funding for a couple months. We wouldn't have Check It, obviously, and so on. So there is an appetite for this, or at least the recognition of need, but like very generally defined, there is a kind of this preference for the invisibility of it, because there are many, for lack of a better word, conservative or more traditional voting base that, it's great that we have this, but we don't want to see it, sort of thing. So this is definitely a challenge of like making it explicit, but we can be clever, right? We don't have to say safer drug use, we can say whatever, because we are talking about holistic safety, right? So it's all about problem framing, it's all about linking not just substance use, but with general well-being and also general feeling of safety, also with sexual assault. Like that we can, it's essential actually to frame the problem in terms of a kind of general safety measures and general well-being, because it is. And this kind of helps meet the preference for not being so explicit or invisibility where it's at.
Sorry, can I ask one more question about this? Of course, I also agree, but I'm also afraid that this would make the policymakers or like conservative voices say that we don't actually need to have that because clubs already have safety measures standards, which I assume they do. Maybe they don't. But I would also be afraid that, we actually also already have these labels in place. Like, they're already required to have security, take seminars on how to prevent sexual harassment or whatever, but maybe I'm wrong.
I don't think that's the case. I mean, there are basic safety requirements about event capacity and fire protocol, but I think any additional provision doesn't necessarily need to be a mandated thing. And in fact, if it's mandated, it might lose some of the value, and some of the value might actually come just from the collaboration and from making a really good case. And the more that service provision is expanded in other venues, the more that other venues who don't have it will start to feel the pressure too. You know, like I said before, the question will increasingly become, why doesn't this party or this club have these provisions when so many others do? So I don't think it needs to be a mandated thing to be successful.
Actually, I think one of my colleagues, Alexandra Carden, would be more competent to answer your question, but I'll try my best. Because she's kind of our science officer and doing the research stuff when it comes to, well, numbers and graphs and international comparison. But what I can say is that breaking this down to legalizing or not legalizing is an oversimplification. It's just a part of the puzzle. And how to say this? I see so many people working their asses off to change the law, where maybe that energy would be spent wiser otherwise. If you decriminalize something, and it makes it easier for people who use substances to access services, because it takes a little bit of the stigma away. It makes it easier for organizers to collaborate with organizations, because it takes a little bit of the stigma away, but only a little bit. How do we change a culture? I just can't, it doesn't change the culture. The stigma will still be there, because the majority of society will still have the views that they have right now, even if you change the laws. Decriminalization helps. Whether legalization actually leads to a safer environment, I doubt that. The question is, how do we as a society want, which place do we as a society want to give to nightlife, to having a party, to dancing, to using substances that alter our mind? And I don't think there isn't an easy solution. And if you compare it with the Netherlands, they have a different culture, at least when it comes to substance use. The way the campaigns they run would be impossible to run for us, the online campaigns, for example. I don't know whether that answers the question.
Kind of processing and thinking, how do you think does the communication with specific segments of the users actually is working at the moment here in Austria? Communication, just communicating about drug use and the outreach, so to speak, with different segments of club goers.
Can you rephrase the question? Because I'm not sure what...
No, just basically how do you think it's the communication, how is it with the different segments of, you know, different communities and different club goers? Is there outreach there? Like, does it really...
As in, how does the communication differ from policymakers, or?
No, in terms of, you know, because you were just saying that the type of communication or outreach that they have in the Netherlands would not be the same as in here. How is the communication situation right now here, and what would you do to improve it? I'm probably having a little bit of a tougher question round at the moment, but that's what I was trying to get.
how to get messages out there, how to get messages heard. Is that
yeah,
the question?
Messages through. Yeah.
From whom to whom? From us as providers to revellers, or to the government, or to
Yes, to
Okay.
users. Yeah, to
substance users?
ravers. Yeah.
Well, the challenge is how to find attention. I mean, there are so many media. We are consuming media 24/7. The younger the people are, the more they consume. You need to put an awful lot of effort and money into a campaign in order for it to be heard and be perceived and understood. I mean,
Yeah, I think I'm going to use this question as an opportunity to do a shameless plug of my organization and the events we do, because this is, I feel, the most that we can do at a time to influence the way people think about substances, their use and their relationship to other segments of their lives. So follow Psycare Austria on Facebook. We will have public events with the Central European University, with hopefully with Gabor Mate, an addiction therapist. And there was one more really cool one we have planned, but I don't remember at the moment. But I feel like this is what I know what we can do, is just to talk, open a discussion, listen to people's experiences and issues. And as it was said earlier, that any change cannot come from the top down. So what we are trying to do is listen to what's from the bottom up and provide a platform for people to exchange best practices and connect.
Thank you. It's been very unfortunate that I took the last slot for questions, but I'm sure they will all be welcome to answer your questions if you have any. Did you want to add something, Jacob?
Is there time to answer that last question, or
is there?
1 minute?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, let's do it.
Just to wrap it together, to answer this question about messaging, how does this communication get out, and also what Steve was saying about changing the culture, it doesn't need to necessarily just come from the organizations, the service providers themselves. When we're thinking big, clubs themselves, party organizers, they have massive Telegram channels, they have big online audiences. The clubs themselves also, they're a physical location. So hopefully all these different spaces direct to the partygoers, where they look at their phones, where they look online, and where they physically show up, can become sort of educational spaces, or at least spaces where we increasingly talk about service provision and harm reduction and safety. And hopefully with using all of these spaces, not just classical top-down or direct messaging or email chains, then we start to also change the culture around it too.
Community
building.
Yeah, also, last word, I think, is that it's also up to all of us who are out there on the dance floor to influence the culture. So I think you behaving in a way that you would like other people to behave, especially if there's a crisis or someone not behaving in a way that you think should be appropriate there, or someone who needs support. Okay, somebody disagrees. But I also think that we are part of the culture. We are the culture. So if we want to change, I guess what we can do is change how we are.
Thank you all very much for this panel talk. Yes, you can probably later continue with some questions like one-to-one. Thank you.
Ich bin der Schlüsselmacher. Aber ich mache nicht einfach nur Schlüssel. Ich verschaffe dir Zugang zu den besten Geschichten der Welt. Denn meine Schlüssel bringen dich überall hin und können alles mit dir machen. Ist der hier für dich?
Unlock great stories. Kanal Plus. Stream großartige europäische Serien und Filme.